The Mets spring training is in full effect and in full swing, so let's bring in your favorite Mets content creator, Tyler Ward, with some big Mets updates. My man, how you doing, my man?
Oh, Brandon, what an intro. I love that. You've been watching the content. I can tell. Let's get this thing going, baby.
Always, man, one of your biggest fans out there. I just wish we could make it down to Port St. Lucie for some good weather. And they got their first game coming up on Saturday. But let's backtrack a little bit to Tuesday, because I think we all can relate to Steve Cohen when he said that he pretty much had blown through his budget this offseason to put together a
Right.
championship-worthy team. We don't have the same checkbook that he has. So I'm just going to ask you yes, no, and why. Did he buy a team that can compete with the LA Dodgers?
Oh, he absolutely did. And this goes back to 2011, believe it or not, as Steve Cohen was initially trying to buy, yes, the LA Dodgers. That didn't happen, obviously. So he pivoted to the Mets and was initially a minority owner until he became the full-time owner over the past 4+ years now. So absolutely, it's to compete with the Dodgers. That's a team that he's admired for a number of years as a baseball fan, and rightfully so. And I think what you look at what the Mets have done, especially over this past offseason, spending over $1 billion in total dollars spent, they're certainly on the right track to find themselves in that Dodgers category.
All right, the money was spent on paper. They're one of the best teams in baseball. Francisco Alvarez said that they have the best lineup in baseball. But we know bad things can happen to good teams throughout the course of the season. I mean, just think about it right now. Frankie Montas is already out for, 3 months? Does this team have the depth to go with the star power to win games during adversity and make a run?
Yeah, I would definitely say they have the depth to fight this adversity because let's not forget the Mets were without their ace and Kodai Senga for pretty much the entire season last year, and they didn't make any real moves outside of staying internal for especially the first half of the season. So while there is definitely a possibility the Mets may stay internal, there's also reality that they may go external here because the depth is not terrible in the case of Griffin Canning, Paul Blackburn, and Tyler McGill. But I think the Mets have enough uncertainty at the back end of the rotation to at least consider the idea of landing someone who's currently available in one of the trade or free agent market.
All right, well, let's go back to something that Steve Cohen said again when he was talking about the attendance of last year. Do you feel like that's him pretty much saying that he's telling the fan base, look, I've done my job in terms of bringing in a main attraction and putting together a pretty good roster? You think he's putting it on the fan base to where it's like, hey, Amazins, it's up to you to show up and build a championship type environment at Citi Field?
Yeah, I think it's kind of twofold. I think Steve is very wary of the fact of how expensive it is to get to a Mets game to begin with, right? It's not necessarily the same situation it was 20 years ago. And with this Juan Soto contract, it's only going to make things a bit more difficult. So outside the natural struggles that some average fans have with attending games, I think it definitely goes in hand with the player performance, right? This Mets team was horrendous in the first 2 months of the year last year. And until the Mets kind of prove that they are a fringe playoff team, which wasn't until really towards the end of summer last year when they finally found themselves in that category, that's when fans were really starting to be swayed and saying, okay, the Mets have something special brewing here in Queens. So I think it comes down to getting off to a hot start this year, as well as the fans realizing we brought in Soto for a reason. So now it's our turn as the fans to go and show up as well.
Do you expect a slow start to the season?
I don't. We'll see what happens, obviously. I think it can't get much worse than how last year started, truthfully. So us Mets fans are prepared for it all. But I think when you bring in a guy like Juan Soto and a lot of the familiar faces that helped with your deep run last year, it only increases the likelihood for you to get off to a hot start this spring and hopefully the regular season there. Even with a long road trip to begin the year for the Mets, Juan Soto makes things a bit better.
Yeah, I can't wait for that home opener at Citi Field.
Me
Final
too.
thoughts, Wardy, because they got the first exhibition game coming up Saturday. Final thoughts. What are we missing in terms of some storylines or something that we should be talking about in spring training?
I think when it comes to spring training, it really will be this continued question as to how is this rotation going to play out, right? Now with having two question marks as to, okay, we're going to have three guys essentially fill in those two holes and the Griffin Cannings, the Tyler McGills, and the Paul Blackburns of the world. Well, there's been a lot of rumblings going on with a guy like Jose Quintana, so don't be shocked if the Mets find themselves back in that market for the veteran lefty, as he gave the Mets a lot of serviceable innings this past year and is still waiting to sign with a team as we're oh so close to spring training officially beginning this Saturday, as you alluded to. But outside that, Brandon, I'm just excited for Mets baseball to be back. I can't wait to hang out with you and many others at games this season. So let's just get this thing going.
Yeah, man, we're hopping on that Express 7 train because I don't got time for that 7 train takes forever sometimes, man. But yeah, man, can't wait to hit Citi Field with you, create some really cool content, and thanks for freeing up your days, freeing up some time to come talk with us.
Of course. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate you guys always.